The geopolitics of the Middle East have crossed a point of no return. What was once a calculated shadow war fought through proxies, cyber espionage, and clandestine assassinations has burst into an open, direct, and unmitigated military confrontation. The regional architecture is shaking as the United States and its regional allies pivot from a policy of containment to one of systematic destruction. For decades, Washington treated Iran as a structural problem to be managed through economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and occasional surgical strikes. However, the signing and subsequent collapse of the June 2026 Peace Memorandum of Understanding changed the calculus. With the deal dead, the United States has unleashed a military campaign designed not just to punish Tehran, but to force a systemic collapse. The core catalyst for this sudden escalation lies beneath the rugged terrain of Natanz. Intelligence reports indicating that Tehran has accelerated its uranium enrichment inside the heavily fortified Pickaxe Mountain facility forced Washington's hand. This underground complex, buried beneath layers of reinforced concrete and rock, was designed to be impervious to conventional airstrikes, signaling to the West that Iran was making its final sprint toward a nuclear deterrent. President Donald Trump's administration viewed this development as an unacceptable shift in the global balance of power. The White House declared that the time for diplomatic maneuvering had expired, asserting that the Pickaxe Mountain facility would be neutralized by any means necessary. Consequently, the United States initiated a sweeping aerial and missile campaign, marking the beginning of an all-out assault. Unlike the localized skirmishes of the past, the current air campaign resembles the opening phases of major historic conflicts. For over 2 weeks, U.S. strategic bombers, long-range cruise missiles, and carrier-based strike aircraft have hammered Iranian sovereign territory. The primary objectives are clear: dismantle Iran's integrated air defense systems, sever its command and control nodes, and isolate its political leadership. Geopolitically, the United States is not acting alone. It is backed by a coalition of regional allies who view the Islamic Republic as an existential threat. For the Sunni Arab monarchies of the Persian Gulf and Israel, an unchecked, potentially nuclear-armed Iran presents an intolerable risk to their national security and economic survival. This shared anxiety has solidified an unprecedented operational alliance. The battlefield geography centers heavily on the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point. Following Iranian disruptions of commercial shipping in early July 2026, the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, alongside coalition partners, established an aggressive maritime blockade. By denying Tehran the ability to disrupt global energy flows, the coalition is attempting to strip Iran of its primary geopolitical leverage. The coalition's strategy can be described as a meat grinder approach. Rather than risking a high-casualty ground invasion across Iran's mountainous and hostile terrain, the U.S. and its allies are utilizing overwhelming technological and asymmetric advantages. They are systematically degrading Iran's conventional military infrastructure, waiting patiently for the regime to buckle under its own weight. The domestic situation within Iran complicates Tehran's defense. Years of crushing economic sanctions, rampant inflation, and internal civil unrest have weakened the state's social contract. President Masoud Pezeshkian himself acknowledged that while the military front is perilous, the economic front is where the country's survival will ultimately be decided, highlighting the severe vulnerability of the home front. Yet the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, remains a formidable and highly ideological force. Faced with an existential threat, the IRGC's doctrine dictates a strategy of total regional retaliation. The Iranian leadership understands that if the regime is destined to fall, it possesses the military capability to drag the rest of the Middle East down with it. Tehran's counter-strategy relies heavily on its vast arsenal of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and loitering munitions. The Khatam al-Anbiya Central Command has authorized strikes against U.S. military installations across the region. U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan have already come under sustained missile barrages, testing the limits of Western air defense systems like the Patriot and THAAD. Beyond targeting American forces, Iran's retaliation targets the economic lifelines of its neighbors. The IRGC has explicitly threatened to launch overwhelming strikes against the oil fields, desalination plants, and power grids of Gulf cooperation countries. In a total war scenario, a synchronized strike on facilities like Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq or the UAE's critical infrastructure could plunge the region into darkness. This brings us to the core of Caspian Report's analysis, the concept of asymmetric regional paralysis. Iran does not need to win a conventional war against the United States to achieve its strategic objectives. If Tehran can inflict enough economic pain on global markets and destabilize Western allies in the region, it may force Washington to recalculate the cost of its campaign. The global economic ramifications of this total war are already vibrating through international markets. The threat of prolonged instability in the Persian Gulf has sent shockwaves through the energy sector. Brent crude prices are fluctuating wildly, and global supply chains, already strained by years of geopolitical fragmentation, are bracing for a severe long-term shock. Furthermore, the conflict is shifting from a regional war into a theater of great power competition. Moscow and Beijing are watching the American campaign with deep apprehension. Iran has served as a critical geopolitical buffer and economic partner for both Eurasian powers, and its total collapse would significantly alter the geopolitical map to Washington's advantage. While China relies heavily on Middle Eastern oil to fuel its industrial economy, Russia views Iran as a vital strategic partner in pushing back against Western hegemony. A complete American victory and the installation of a pro-Western regime in Tehran would allow Washington to project power directly into Central Asia and the Caspian Basin, a scenario Moscow will desperately try to prevent. However, the sheer velocity and scale of the US-led assault leave Iran's traditional partners with few viable options. Providing diplomatic cover in the United Nations Security Council is no longer effective when bombs are actively falling on Iranian cities. Direct military intervention by Russia or China remains highly unlikely, leaving Tehran largely isolated on the physical battlefield. The coalition's air campaign is also targeting the logistical networks that connect Tehran to its proxy network, the Axis of Resistance. Supply lines running through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon have been severed by continuous airstrikes. By cutting off the flow of advanced weaponry to Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, the coalition is isolating the Iranian core from its external limbs. Deprived of steady logistical support and facing intense pressure themselves, these proxy groups find their operational capabilities constrained. While they can still launch retaliatory rocket and drone strikes, they cannot alter the strategic reality that their patron in Tehran is being systematically dismantled from the air. Inside Washington, the strategic consensus has shifted toward a waiting game. Pentagon's planners believe that the combination of kinetic devastation from above and economic strangulation from within will eventually trigger an internal fracturing. The objective is to push the Iranian state to a systemic breaking point where the cost of maintaining the current regime becomes unbearable for its own elites. This strategy is not without profound risks. Political vacuums in the Middle East rarely yield stable democratic outcomes. The sudden collapse of a highly centralized, heavily armed state of nearly 90 million people could trigger a catastrophic humanitarian crisis, mass migration waves, and a civil war that could destabilize the region for a generation. Moreover, as the pressure intensifies, the risk of a miscalculation grows exponentially. If Iran perceives that its total destruction is imminent, it may choose to deploy its remaining strategic assets in a desperate, unconstrained final strike, potentially targeting international shipping lanes globally or launching mass casualty attacks on civilian centers in neighboring states. The United States and its allies have made their move, gambling that their overwhelming military superiority can force a controlled collapse of the Islamic Republic without triggering a broader regional apocalypse. The chess pieces are moving rapidly. The shadow war is over, and the era of open, unadulterated confrontation has begun. As the missiles continue to fall and the economic pressure suffocates the Iranian state, the world can only watch and wait. The old Middle Eastern order is being forcefully dismantled, but what rises from its ashes remains entirely uncertain.